The stars looked different from the observation deck of the horizon's edge. Lieutenant Jake Morrison pressed his hand against the cool glass and watched the blue planet growing larger in the viewport. This was Valara Prime, home to one of the most advanced civilizations humanity had ever encountered. Jake had been in space for 3 years now, but this mission felt different. More important somehow. Behind him, Ambassador Richard Hayes was reviewing the diplomatic protocols for the 5th time that morning. The man was nervous and Jake couldn't blame him. The Valarans were known for their strict codes of honor and their intolerance for mistakes. One wrong word, one incorrect gesture, and years of careful negotiations could collapse. Jake's job was simple: keep the ambassador safe. He was part of a 4-person security team, and he took his work seriously. At 28 years old, he had served in the military for a decade, and protecting people had become second nature to him. He wasn't the biggest or the strongest, but he was fast and he paid attention to details that others missed. The ship descended through Valara's atmosphere, and Jake got his first real look at an alien city. The buildings were made of some kind of crystal that caught the light and threw it in every direction. Towers spiraled upward like frozen water, and bridges of pure energy connected them. It was beautiful in a way that made his chest tight. Captain Ryan Foster brought the Horizon's Edge down in the Royal Landing Bay with practiced ease. The bay was enormous, easily large enough to hold 20 ships their size. Valaran guards stood at attention along the walls, their armor gleaming like mirrors. They were tall, these aliens, at least 7 feet on average, with skin that had a faint blue tint and eyes that seemed to glow from within. Jake and his team were the first out, scanning the area for threats. The Valarans had provided assurances of safety, but Jake trusted his instincts more than promises. Everything seemed secure. The guards were professional, keeping their distance but watching everything. Ambassador Hayes emerged from the ship with Dr. Lisa Chang, the mission's chief medical officer. She was there to share human medical knowledge and learn from the Valarans in return. 2 other diplomats followed them. Jake and his team formed a loose perimeter around them as a Velaran official approached. The official bowed in the Velaran manner, a graceful gesture that involved placing both hands over the heart. Ambassador Hayes returned the bow, and Jake could see the tension ease from his shoulders. So far, so good. They were led through corridors that seemed to pulse with inner light. Jake memorized the route, counting doorways and marking exits. Old habits from his training. The palace was massive, room after room filled with things that looked like art but might have been technology. With the Valarans, it was hard to tell the difference. The throne room took Jake's breath away. The ceiling soared at least 100 feet high, and the walls were made of crystal that showed the sky beyond. Seated on a throne of white stone was Queen Serana herself. She was impressive, regal in a way that had nothing to do with the crown on her head. Her presence filled the room. Standing beside the throne was a younger Valaran woman, smaller than the others Jake had seen. She wore simpler clothing and her eyes were bright with curiosity. This had to be Princess Alara, the Queen's youngest daughter. The formal greetings took nearly an hour. There were speeches and exchanges of gifts and careful words about friendship between their peoples. Jake stood at attention, eyes moving constantly, watching the guards, the servants, the officials. Everyone was a potential threat until proven otherwise. When the formal ceremony finally ended, the Queen invited them to a reception in the palace gardens. Jake was relieved. Open spaces were easier to secure than closed rooms. The gardens were beautiful, filled with plants that hummed softly and flowers that seemed to float in the air without stems. Princess Alara approached the human delegation. Up close, she looked young, maybe equivalent to a human in her early 20s. She spoke to Ambassador Hayes in careful, accented English, asking questions about Earth and human culture. Her enthusiasm was genuine and infectious. Jake kept his distance but remained alert. There were perhaps 50 people in the garden, a mix of Velaran nobles and officials. Servants moved through the crowd offering drinks and food. The Valaran guard stood at the perimeter, relaxed but watchful. Princess Alara laughed at something Dr. Chang said, and the sound was musical. She was likable, Jake thought. Not what he had expected from alien royalty. She seemed genuinely interested in the humans, not just being polite. That was when Jake noticed the servant. Something about the way he moved was wrong. Too focused, too intent. Jake's hand moved instinctively to the weapon at his hip. Valaran technology was everywhere in this place, but humans were allowed to carry their own defensive weapons. Jake was grateful for that now. The servant was moving closer to Princess Alara. His hand went inside his robe. Jake's training took over. He didn't think, he moved. 3 long strides brought him between the servant and the princess, just as the man's hand emerged holding a small device. Time seemed to slow. Jake saw the servant's thumb press down on the device, saw the spray of fine mist that shot out, saw Princess Alara's eyes go wide with shock. Jake turned, putting his body between her and the mist. He felt it hit his face and neck cold and sharp. Then everything happened at once. Valaran guards were everywhere, shouting in their own language. The servant was on the ground, surrounded. More servants threw off their robes, revealing weapons. Jake's team returned fire. The peaceful garden became a battlefield in seconds. Jake felt strange. His skin was burning where the mist had touched it. He tried to move toward the ambassador to protect him, but his legs wouldn't work right. He stumbled and fell to one knee. His vision was blurring. Strong hands caught him. Princess Alara was there, her face close to his, saying something he couldn't hear over the ringing in his ears. He tried to tell her to get down, to find cover, but his tongue was thick in his mouth. The burning spread from his skin inward. It felt like fire in his veins. Jake had been hurt before, shot twice and stabbed once during his service, but this was different. This was worse. He tried to focus on the princess's face, tried to stay conscious, but darkness was pulling at him. He heard her screaming for healers, felt himself being lifted. The sky above was so blue, so clear, just like Earth's sky. He thought of home, of his sister Kate and his parents. They would be told he died in the line of duty. He hoped they would be proud. Princess Alara's face appeared above him again. Her eyes were glowing brighter now, and he realized she was crying. Valaran tears caught the light like diamonds. She was saying something over and over. He couldn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. Stay with me. Don't die. Jake wanted to tell her it was okay, that this was his job, that saving people was what he did. But the darkness was too strong now. It pulled him down, and the last thing he saw was her face, those luminescent eyes full of tears before everything went black. Somewhere far away, he heard alarms, heard people shouting, felt the sensation of being moved quickly, but it all seemed distant, unimportant. The burning had spread through his entire body now. Every cell felt like it was on fire. He tried to hold on, tried to fight, but the poison was too strong. Jake Morrison, who had survived a decade of military service, who had faced down enemies across 3-star systems, was dying from a weapon he had never seen before. A weapon meant for someone else. A weapon he had taken willingly, without hesitation, because that was what he did. In the medical bay, surrounded by technology he couldn't understand and aliens he had just met, Jake's heart began to slow. The Valaran healers worked frantically, their hands moving in patterns that made the air shimmer. Dr. Chang was there too, her face pale as she watched her instruments show the poison spreading through his system. And Princess Alara never left his side, her hand gripping his, her voice speaking words of encouragement in her own language, as if she could will him to live through sheer determination. Above them all, Queen Serana watched with an expression that was both sad and determined. A human had saved her daughter's life. She would not let that sacrifice be meaningless. Jake's consciousness faded to almost nothing, just a tiny spark fighting against the dark. He didn't know about the Queen's resolve or the princess's devotion. He didn't know that his actions had set in motion events that would change the relationship between 2 species forever. He only knew that he had done his duty, and if this was the end, at least it meant something. The medical bay of the Valaran Palace was unlike anything the human delegation had ever seen. The walls themselves seemed alive, pulsing with soft light that shifted colors based on the patient's condition. Right now, the light around Jake Morrison's containment pod was a deep, troubling red. 3 days had passed since the attack in the garden. 3 days of watching Jake hover between life and death while the Valaran healers did everything they could to slow the poison's progress. They had managed to keep him alive, but just barely. His body was fighting a battle it could not win. Ambassador Richard Hayes stood at the observation window, his face drawn with exhaustion and guilt. He had barely slept since the attack. Captain Ryan Foster stood beside him, equally tired. They had both tried to see Jake, to talk to him, but he had not regained consciousness since that first terrible moment in the garden. Dr. Lisa Chang emerged from the medical chamber. pulling off her gloves with sharp, angry movements. Her eyes were red from crying and lack of sleep. She had worked alongside the Velaran healers constantly, trying to understand the poison and find a way to counter it. Nothing had worked. She looked at the ambassador and shook her head. The gesture was small, but it carried the weight of defeat. Ambassador Hayes closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He had known this was coming. The Velaran chief healer, Master Torin, had warned him yesterday. The poison was designed to attack the Velaran nervous system, but it was proving equally devastating to human biology, perhaps more so. Master Torin appeared at Dr. Chang's side. He was old, even by Velaran standards, his skin more silver than blue. His eyes held centuries of knowledge and, right now, deep sorrow. He spoke in slow, careful English, wanting to make sure the humans understood. The poison continues to spread despite our efforts. His organs are beginning to fail. The heart grows weaker. We have perhaps 2 days, maybe 3, before there is nothing more we can do. I am sorry. We have tried everything we know. Ambassador Hayes nodded slowly. He had to contact Earth, had to tell Jake's family. The thought made him sick. How do you tell parents that their son died saving an alien princess on a world they would never see? How do you explain that his sacrifice, while heroic, still ended in death? The doors to the medical bay opened with a sound like wind chimes. Everyone turned and then immediately bowed. Queen Serana had entered, and with her came Princess Alara. The princess looked terrible. She had not left the medical bay for more than a few hours at a time since the attack. Her eyes were dim, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion and grief. The queen, however, looked like controlled fire. She moved with purpose, her crystalline crown catching the light and throwing it in sharp angles. She approached the containment pod where Jake lay, pale and still. Machines surrounded him, some human and some Velaran, all working together to keep him alive for just a little longer. Ambassador Hayes straightened and prepared to offer the formal greeting, but Queen Serana held up one hand, stopping him. She studied Jake's face through the transparent pod, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice filled the room. This human saved the life of my daughter. He took a weapon meant for blood royal without hesitation. By the old laws of my people, a life debt of the highest order now exists. I will not permit him to die while breath remains in my body. Ambassador Hayes glanced at Master Torin, who looked equally surprised. The old healer stepped forward carefully. Your Majesty, we have done everything possible. The poison is too strong, too specifically designed. Even our most advanced treatments only slow its progress. I do not believe there is a cure. The Queen turned to face him, and even Master Torin, who had served her family for decades, took a step back from the intensity in her eyes. You said you do not believe there is a cure. That is not the same as saying there is no cure. We will find it. She began issuing orders immediately. Every scientist and healer of note in the Velaran Empire was to be summoned. They would bring all their knowledge, all their research, everything they had ever learned about poisons and their counters. The royal archives would be opened, something that happened perhaps once in a generation. Every resource the Empire possessed would be dedicated to saving Jake Morrison's life. Princess Alara moved to her mother's side. She looked up at the Queen with desperate hope. Thank you, Mother. Thank you. Queen Serana placed a hand on her daughter's head in a gesture of affection. He gave his life for you without thought of cost. We can do no less for him. Ambassador Hayes found his voice. Your Majesty, we are grateful beyond words for your efforts. But our own medical experts have examined Lieutenant Morrison. The poison is unlike anything humans have encountered. Even with all your resources, even with all your knowledge, there may truly be no cure. We should perhaps prepare for the worst. Let him go with dignity. The Queen turned to face the ambassador, and he saw something in her expression that made him understand why the Velarans had survived and thrived for thousands of years. It was absolute, unbending determination. Ambassador Hayes, I have studied your species extensively since we made first contact. I have read your histories, your stories, your philosophies. Do you know what impressed me most about humanity? Your refusal to accept the impossible. You were told you could not fly, so you built machines with wings. You were told you could not leave your planet, so you built ships that reached the stars. You were told you would destroy yourselves with your wars and your differences, and yet here you stand, reaching out to other species with hope and friendship. She moved closer to him, and though she was not threatening, her presence was overwhelming. Your people do not give up when facing the impossible. You fight, you adapt, you overcome. And now you suggest that I, ruler of an empire older than your civilization, should simply give up? Should let a hero die without exhausting every possibility? The ambassador swallowed hard. No, Your Majesty. I only meant that we should be realistic about his chances. Realistic, the Queen repeated as if tasting the word. Lieutenant Morrison was realistic when he threw himself in front of an unknown weapon to save my daughter. Was he calculating his odds of survival? No, he acted from courage and honor and duty. The least we can do is match his courage with our own. Over the next hours, the medical bay became a center of intense activity. Scientists and healers arrived from across the planet and from orbital stations. They brought equipment and data, theories and experimental treatments. The Velaran Royal Archives, sealed for decades, were opened and ancient. Texts were brought forth under heavy guard. Dr. Chang found herself working alongside minds that had studied medicine for longer than her entire species had, possessed written language. It was humbling and inspiring in equal measure. The Velarans treated her as an equal, listening to her suggestions, incorporating human medical knowledge with their own. Master Torin coordinated the efforts with quiet efficiency. He set teams to studying different approaches. One group examined the poison itself, breaking down its components looking for weaknesses. Another researched historical cases of similar toxins. A third began testing experimental treatments on simulated tissues, trying to find anything that might work. Princess Alara refused to leave Jake's side. She sat in a chair beside the containment pod, talking to him constantly. She told him about Valara, about her people's history, about her own life. Whether he could hear her or not, she kept talking, as if her voice alone could anchor him to life. Ambassador Hayes watched all this activity with growing amazement. The resources being dedicated to saving one human life were staggering. Hundreds of the Empire's best minds working around the clock. The Queen herself remained in the medical bay, reviewing reports, making decisions, pushing everyone to work harder and faster. On the fourth day, Jake's condition worsened dramatically. Alarms sounded throughout the medical bay as his heart rate became irregular. Dr. Chang and Master Torin rushed to stabilize him, but it was clear they were losing the battle. His body simply could not fight the poison anymore. The Queen watched from the observation window, her hands gripped together so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Princess Alara was weeping openly, begging Jake to hold on, to keep fighting. The medical staff worked with desperate intensity, but everyone in the room could feel death approaching. For a moment, it seemed like the end had come. Jake's heart stopped. The monitors flatlined. Dr. Chang grabbed the human defibrillation equipment, while Master Torin prepared a Velaran equivalent. They shocked Jake's heart once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. Princess Alara's cry of anguish cut through the room like a knife. But Queen Serana's voice rose above it, sharp and commanding. Again, do it again! They shocked him a 4th time, a 5th. On the 6th attempt, Jake's heart stuttered and then began beating again, weak but steady. The room erupted in relieved gasps, but the Queen remained focused. This is not enough. We are treating symptoms, not the cause. We need the cure itself, not just ways to slow the poison. She turned to Master Torin. You said you have found references in the archives to something that might help. Tell me everything. The old healer hesitated. Your Majesty, the references are vague, possibly. The medical bay had become a place of quiet desperation. Jake Morrison had been unconscious for 7 days now, and despite the efforts of the finest minds in the Velaran Empire, he was dying. Slowly, painfully, inevitably dying. Dr. Lisa Chang stood over a holographic display showing Jake's vital signs in 3 dimensions. Every system in his body was failing. His kidneys were barely functioning. His liver was damaged beyond what should be survivable. His heart muscle was weakening with each beat. The poison had spread to every cell, every tissue, every organ. She rubbed her eyes, trying to focus. She had not slept properly in days. None of them had. The Velaran healers worked in shifts, but the humans refused to leave. Captain Ryan Foster brought them food and forced them to eat. Ambassador Richard Hayes coordinated with Earth, bringing in every piece of medical data that might help. Master Torin approached her station, moving with the careful grace of someone very old and very tired. He had been teaching her about Velaran biology, sharing knowledge that normally took decades to learn. In return, she had shown him the intricacies of human physiology. Together, they understood the problem better than anyone. They just could not solve it. The protein structures are too complex, Master Torin said softly. Looking at the molecular model of the poison floating in the hologram, it binds to the neural receptors in a way that should be reversible, but every time we try to break the bond, it simply reforms in a slightly different configuration. It adapts faster than we can counter it, Dr. Chang nodded. She had reached the same conclusion hours ago. It's like it was designed to be incurable. Maybe it was. The assassins wanted to make sure Princess Ilara would die, no matter what treatment she received. They did not account for Lieutenant Morrison's bravery, Master Torin said. He took the weapon meant for her. He disrupted their plan. But now he pays the price for that courage. Princess Ilara sat in her usual chair beside Jake's containment pod. She had barely left his side since the attack. She talked to him constantly, sometimes in English, sometimes in her own language. She told him stories about Valara, about the crystal forests and the singing oceans. She told him about her childhood, about learning to fly the royal ships, about her dreams of exploring the galaxy. Whether he could hear her or not, no one knew. But she kept talking anyway, her voice soft and steady, a lifeline thrown into the darkness where Jake drifted. Ambassador Hayes entered the medical bay carrying a data tablet. His face was grim. I just received a message from Earth. Jake's family wants to speak with him even if he cannot respond. They want to say goodbye. Dr. Chang felt tears sting her eyes. She blinked them away angrily. She was a doctor. She was supposed to save people, not watch them die. Can we set up a communication link? I'll arrange it, the ambassador said quietly. The preparation took an hour. They positioned a camera and screen near Jake's pod. When the connection was established, a woman's face appeared on the screen. She was in her late 20s with the same brown hair and blue eyes as Jake. This was his sister, Kate Morrison. Behind her stood two older people, Jake's parents. His mother was crying, trying to be brave. His father stood stiff and silent, his military background evident in his posture. Kate was the one who spoke. "Hey, little brother," she said, her voice cracking. "I know you probably can't hear me, but I needed to tell you something. We're proud of you, Jake, so proud. You did what you always do. You protected someone who needed protecting. You stood between danger and an innocent person, and you didn't hesitate." She stopped, wiping her eyes. "Mom and Dad want you to know they love you, that they understand, that if you need to let go, it's okay. You've fought hard enough. You've done enough." Jake's mother leaned into frame, her face wet with tears. "My baby boy. My brave, beautiful boy. Come home to us, Jake. However you can, just come home." Princess Ilara watched the screen with wide eyes. She understood now. Seeing Jake's family, what this death would cost. Not just one life, but the grief of everyone who loved him. She reached out and took Jake's hand through the pod's access port, holding it gently. "I will not let him die," she whispered in her own language. "I swear it." The communication ended and the room fell silent except for the steady beeping of the medical equipment. Dr. Chang returned to her work, her jaw set with new determination. There had to be something they were missing, some angle they had not considered. Master Torin was thinking the same thing. He called up the ancient texts from the Royal Archives again, reading through references that were thousands of years old. Most of it was philosophical, discussions of life and death and the nature of existence. But there were also practical notes, recipes for medicines, descriptions of rare plants and minerals with healing properties. One passage kept drawing his attention. It was vague, written in an old dialect he could barely read. But it spoke of a cure for any poison, any disease, any ailment. It spoke of the Keeper. He had mentioned this to Queen Serana before she left for the Nexus Caverns 3 days ago. The caverns were far from the palace, deep in the mountains that ringed Valara's northern continent. They had been sealed after an expedition 300 years ago had gone wrong. Only 5 of the 30 explorers had returned, and they had been changed, their minds damaged by what they had seen. The Queen had taken 6 of her best guards, Captain Foster and Ambassador Hayes, with her. Princess Ilara had wanted to go, but the Queen had forbidden it. Someone needed to stay with Jake, to make sure he knew he was not alone. Now Master Torin wondered if they would return at all. The caverns were dangerous in ways that went beyond physical threats. They affected the mind, created illusions, trapped the unwary in loops of their own fears and memories. Even if the Keeper existed, Reaching it would require passing through trials that had broken stronger people than those in the Queen's party. He pushed the worry aside and focused on what he could control. The data, the research, the treatments. Even if the Queen found a cure, they needed to keep Jake alive long enough for it to arrive. Dr. Chang had moved to a different workstation, running simulations of potential treatments. Everyone ended the same way. Temporary stabilization followed by continued deterioration. She slammed her fist on the table in frustration. There has to be something, she said. Some combination of drugs, some procedure, something that will buy us more time. We are already using every technique we know, Master Torrens said gently. His body is kept alive by machines at this point. Without them, he would have died days ago. Then we make better machines, Dr. Chang snapped. We enhance the treatments. We try things that might kill him faster but might also save him. Master Torren considered this. It went against everything he had been taught as a healer. First, do no harm. But Jake was dying anyway. What was the harm in trying something desperate if the alternative was certain death? What do you propose? He asked. They spent the next hours developing a radical treatment plan. They would use a combination of Velaran cellular regeneration technology and human nanomedicine. The nanobots would be programmed to identify and dismantle the poison molecules, while the Velaran technology repaired the damage as it was cleared. It was risky. The nanobots might not work properly with Velaran regeneration fields. The interaction could cause cascading failures in Jake's already weakened systems, but it might also work. It might buy them the time they needed. They presented the plan to Princess Ilara. She listened carefully, asking questions that showed she understood the risks. When they finished, she looked at Jake's still face for a long moment. Do it, she said. He is a fighter. He will not give up. We should not give up either. The treatment began at dawn on the 8th day. Dr. Chang injected the nanobots directly into Jake's bloodstream, while Master Torren activated the regeneration field. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. Then Jake's body began to convulse. Alarms screamed. His heart rate spiked, then dropped dangerously low. It's not working, one of the Velaran assistants said. We should stop. No, Dr. Chang said firmly. Give it time. The nanobots need to reach critical mass before they can be effective. The convulsions continued. Jake's vital signs swung wildly between extremes. Princess Ilara gripped his hand tighter, whispering encouragement in his ear. The medical staff stood frozen, watching the monitors, waiting to see if they had just saved Jake or killed him. After 5 agonizing minutes, Jake's body began to stabilize. His heart rate evened out. His breathing, assisted by machines, became more regular. The alarms quieted one by one. Dr. Chang checked the readouts, hardly daring to hope. The nanobots were working. They were identifying the poison molecules and breaking them down. Not fast enough to cure Jake, but fast enough to slow the poison's progress significantly. Combined with the Velaran regeneration field, his damaged organs were actually beginning to repair themselves. It was not a cure. It was not even close to a cure, but it was progress. Real measurable progress for the first time since the attack. How long will this buy us? Master Torren asked, studying the data. Dr. Chang did the calculations. Maybe a week. 2 if we're lucky. The nanobots will eventually be overwhelmed by the poison, and the regeneration field can only do so much. But it's more time than we had before. The Nexus caverns were older than the Velaran Empire itself. They stretched deep into the mountains of the northern continent, a maze of passages that seemed to shift and change when no one was looking. The walls glowed with a faint light that had no source, and the air itself felt heavy with ancient power. Queen Serana led her party deeper into the caverns, her face set with determination. Behind her walked Captain Ryan Foster and Ambassador Richard Hayes, both looking uncomfortable in the borrowed Velaran armor. 4 royal guards completed the party. 2 others had been lost in the first hours, killed by defense systems that activated without warning. They had been walking for 3 days now. Time felt strange here. Sometimes an hour would pass in what felt like minutes. Other times, minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Captain Foster had tried to keep track using his Earth chronometer, but even that seemed unreliable. Ambassador Hayes stepped carefully over rocks that seemed to pulse with inner light. He was exhausted and frightened, but he forced himself to keep moving. Jake Morrison had saved Princess Alara without hesitation. The least he could do was help find a cure for the young man. "Your Majesty," one of the guards called out. The path splits ahead. Queen Serana moved to the front, examining the two passages. They looked identical, both leading down into deeper darkness. But she closed her eyes and seemed to listen to something only she could hear. "This way," she said, pointing to the left passage. "The keeper is close now. I can feel it." They had encountered many strange things in the caverns. Rooms where the floor became the ceiling and the ceiling became the floor. Passages that looped back on themselves impossibly. Creatures made of living crystal that watched them pass but did not attack. And everywhere there were whispers. Voices speaking in languages so old that even the Valarans could not understand them. The caverns played with the mind. Captain Foster had seen his dead brother standing in a passage calling out to him. Ambassador Hayes had walked through a room filled with every diplomatic failure he had ever experienced, watching them play out over and over. The guards had faced their own fears and memories made solid. Only Queen Serana seemed unaffected. She walked forward with absolute focus, never wavering, never showing doubt. It was as if the caverns recognized something in her that made them step aside. The left passage opened into a vast chamber. The ceiling stretched up so high it disappeared into darkness. In the center of the chamber stood a pillar of pure light, and within that light was a presence. Not a physical form, but something that existed beyond physical shape. This was the keeper. Queen Serana approached without fear. Behind her, the others stopped at the edge of the chamber, unwilling to go further. The presence in the light was too vast, too ancient, too other. Even looking at it made their minds hurt. The keeper spoke, and its voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. It spoke directly into their minds in a language that was somehow all languages and no language at the same time. "Why have you come to this place, ruler of a brief and fading empire?" Queen Serana stood tall before the ancient being. "I seek a cure. A human from a young species saved my daughter from poison that was meant to kill her. Now that poison kills him instead. I have exhausted all mortal knowledge. Only you remain." "I know of the human," the keeper said. "I know of his courage and his sacrifice. I know of the poison that devours him. Yes, I can cure him. But you know that my help comes with a price." "Name it," the queen said without hesitation. The light flickered and shifted, and suddenly the keeper showed her images, memories. Her mate, Alara's father, who had died 15 years ago, defending their people from invaders. She saw their first meeting when they were both young and the future seemed full of endless possibilities. She saw their bonding ceremony, the birth of their children, the quiet moments of joy between the duties of ruling. She saw his final battle, saw him fall, saw herself holding him as his light faded. She saw the years after, the grief and the loneliness, the burden of ruling alone. But she also saw how those memories had sustained her, had given her strength when she needed it most. "These are your most precious possessions," the keeper said. "The memories of your bonded one. Every moment you shared with him. Every word, every touch, every feeling. Give them to me and I will give you the cure for the human." The chamber fell silent. Ambassador Hayes understood what was being asked, and horror filled him. The queen was being asked to give up her memories of her husband, of the love of her life, to forget him entirely as if he had never existed. "Your Majesty, you cannot," he said, his voice breaking. "What you are being asked to sacrifice is too much. Jake would not want this." Queen Serana did not turn around. She kept her eyes on the keeper. "The human gave his life for my daughter without knowing her, without knowing if his sacrifice would matter, without any thought for himself. He acted from pure courage and honor. How can I offer less? But these memories," Ambassador Hayes insisted, "they are part of who you are. Without them, you will be changed forever." "I know," the queen said softly, "but a life is more valuable than memories. Lieutenant Morrison deserves to live. He earned that right when he threw himself in front of that weapon." She stepped forward, closer to the pillar of light. "I accept your price, Keeper. Take my memories of my bonded one. Take every moment we shared. Take the joy and the grief and the love. Give me the cure and I will count the cost as worth it." "Mother, no," the voice came from behind them. Princess Alara stood at the entrance to the chamber, having followed them somehow through the caverns. Her face was streaked with tears. "You cannot do this. Father would not want you to forget him." Queen Serana finally turned, and her expression was full of both love and sadness. "Alara, my daughter, Your father died protecting our people because it was the right thing to do. He never hesitated, never calculated the cost to himself or to those who loved him. He simply acted. The human did the same for you. How can I honor your father's memory better than by matching his courage with my own? Princess Ilara ran forward, but one of the guards caught her gently, holding her back. She struggled briefly, then collapsed against the guard, sobbing. The keeper's voice filled the chamber again. You understand what you are giving up? You will remember that you had a bonded one. You will remember that he died. But you will not remember his face, his voice, the moments you shared. You will know you loved him, but you will not remember why. I understand, Queen Serana said. Do it now before I lose my courage. The light around the keeper grew brighter, more intense. It reached out like living tendrils and touched the queen's forehead. She gasped, her body going rigid. Captain Foster moved forward instinctively, but Ambassador Hayes held him back. We cannot interfere, the ambassador whispered. This is her choice. The extraction took only moments, but to Queen Serana it felt like an eternity. She felt the memories being pulled from her mind one by one. She saw them again as they left her, vivid and perfect, and then they were gone. His smile, his laugh, the way he would touch her face when they were alone, the sound of his voice speaking her name, the feeling of dancing with him at celebrations, the warmth of his presence beside her through the long years, all of it, drawn out and taken away, leaving empty spaces where joy and love and grief had been. She tried to hold on, to keep just one memory, just one moment, but the keeper was thorough. When it finished, Queen Serana stood trembling, tears streaming down her face, crying for a loss she could no longer fully remember. The keeper withdrew its tendrils, and in their place appeared a small crystal vial filled with glowing liquid. The cure, it said. It must be administered within 3 days. After that, it will lose its potency. It will neutralize the poison and repair the damage it has caused. The human will live. Queen Serana reached out with shaking hands and took the vial. She held it carefully. This thing she had purchased with memories she would never recover. Thank you, she whispered. Thank me by making his life worth the price you paid, the keeper said. Go now, your time is short. The light began to fade. Princess Ilara broke free from the guard and ran to her mother, embracing her tightly. The queen held her daughter, confused for a moment about why she was crying, why she felt such a profound sense of loss. Then she remembered she had given up her memories. She had forgotten her bonded one, but she had the cure. Jake Morrison would live. Captain Foster and Ambassador Hayes helped support the queen as they made their way back through the caverns. The passages seemed clearer now, less confusing, as if the keeper was guiding them out. They moved as quickly as they could, knowing that 3 days was not much time. The queen was silent during the journey. She clutched the crystal vial to her chest and walked like someone in a dream. Princess Ilara stayed close to her, watching her with worried eyes. Mother, are you all right? She asked at one point. Queen Serana looked at her daughter and managed a small smile. I am well, Ilara. I have what we came for. Lieutenant Morrison will live. That is what matters, but your memories are gone, the queen finished. I know I had a bonded one. I know he was your father. I know he died protecting our people. But I cannot remember his face. I cannot remember the sound of his voice or the feeling of his... The ship touched down in the royal landing bay with hours to spare. Queen Serana was the first to exit, moving quickly despite her exhaustion. Princess Ilara stayed close beside her, and Captain Ryan Foster and Ambassador Richard Hayes followed, all of them running toward the medical bay. Dr. Lisa Chang looked up from her workstation as the doors burst open. She had been monitoring Jake's vital signs, watching as the temporary treatment they had implemented slowly lost its effectiveness. They had perhaps 12 hours left before his body could no longer sustain itself, even with all the machines and medications. Your Majesty, she said, hope flooding through her. You found it? Queen Serana held up the crystal vial. The liquid inside glowed with a soft, steady light. The cure. The keeper promised it would neutralize the poison and repair the damage. How do we administer it? Master Torin approached, his old eyes examining the vial with wonder. I have read about such things in the ancient texts, but I never thought to see one myself. The liquid must be given directly to the patient. Princess Ilara should do it, as is her right by tradition. The life that was saved must help save the life in return. Princess Ilara took the vial from her mother with trembling hands. She approached Jake's containment pod where he lay still and pale, kept alive by machines and determination. She had not left his side for more than a few hours at a time since the attack. Now finally she could do more than just talk to him and hope he heard. Master Torin opened the pod and showed her how to administer the cure. It was simple. The liquid needed to be placed on Jake's tongue. His body would do the rest. Princess Alara leaned over him, carefully tilting his head back and opening his mouth. She poured the glowing liquid in, just a few drops, and then closed his mouth gently. For a moment nothing happened. Then Jake's body began to glow with the same soft light as the cure. It started at his mouth and spread outward, flowing through his veins, reaching every cell that the poison had touched. The light grew brighter and brighter until everyone had to look away. Dr. Chang watched the monitors with her heart pounding. Jake's vital signs were changing rapidly. His heart rate was increasing, becoming stronger. His oxygen levels were rising. The readings from his organs showed rapid improvement, damage being repaired at a speed that should be impossible. "It's working," she whispered, hardly daring to believe it. "The poison is breaking down. His body is healing." The glow faded slowly, and when it was gone, Jake looked different. Color had returned to his face. His breathing, which had been assisted by machines for days, was now strong and steady on its own. The monitors showed normal function across every system, but he did not wake. "Not immediately. Why is he still unconscious?" Princess Alara asked, fear creeping back into her voice. Master Torin checked the readings carefully. "His body is healed, but his mind needs time to recover. He has been fighting the poison for many days, existing in a state between life and death. It will take time for him to find his way back to consciousness. We must be patient, patient." It was easy to say, hard to do. They kept watch over Jake for the rest of that day and through the night. Dr. Chang finally allowed herself to sleep, collapsing in a chair after confirming that all of Jake's vital signs were stable and improving. Master Torin did the same, his ancient body demanding rest after so many days of constant work. But Princess Alara remained awake, sitting beside Jake's bed. She held his hand, which was warm now instead of cold. She talked to him still, telling him about everything that had happened, about her mother's journey and the cure and how everyone was waiting for him to wake up. On the second day after the cure was administered, Jake's fingers twitched. Princess Alara gasped and leaned forward. "Jake, can you hear me?" His eyes moved beneath his closed lids and his breathing changed slightly. He was dreaming, she realized, fighting his way up from the darkness where he had been trapped. On the third day, Jake Morrison opened his eyes. The light was too bright at first, and he closed them again with a groan. Everything felt strange. His body felt heavy but not in pain. He could hear voices speaking in a language he did not understand and then switching to English. "Get Dr. Chang. Get Master Torin. He's waking up." Jake tried to remember where he was. The last clear memory he had was the garden, the servant with the device throwing himself in front of Princess Alara. After that, everything was confused. Darkness and pain and voices calling to him from far away. He forced his eyes open again, blinking against the light. A face came into focus above him. Blue-tinted skin, glowing eyes, features that were familiar. "Princess Alara, you're awake," she said, and her voice was full of joy and relief. "You came back to us." Jake tried to speak, but his throat was dry. Someone held a cup to his lips, and he drank grateful sips of water. When he could finally form words, he asked, "How long?" 14 days since the attack," Dr. Chang said, appearing at his bedside. She was smiling, actually smiling. Something Jake had rarely seen. "You've been unconscious the entire time. We were afraid we would lose you. 14 days. Jake tried to process that. 2 weeks of his life gone." "The princess?" he asked, looking at Alara. "You're okay?" She laughed, a sound like music. "I am fine, thanks to you. You saved my life, Jake Morrison. You took the poison that was meant for me." Memories came flooding back. The burning sensation, the darkness pulling him down, voices in the dark. His sister's voice, this princess's voice, telling him to hold on, to keep fighting. "Your sacrifice was not in vain," Ambassador Hayes said, stepping into view. He looked older than Jake remembered, tired and worn. "You survived, Lieutenant. Against all odds, you survived." Over the next hours, they told him everything, about the desperate search for a cure, about the Queen's journey to the Nexus Caverns, about the price she had paid, giving up her most precious memories to save his life. Jake listened with growing horror and disbelief. She gave up her memories of her husband. For me? His voice cracked. I'm nobody. I was just doing my job. Queen Serana entered the medical bay at that moment as if summoned by the mention of her name. She approached Jake's bed with dignity and grace, though Jake could see something different in her eyes. A sadness that had not been there before. You are not nobody, Lieutenant Morrison, she said firmly. You are a hero who acted without hesitation to save my daughter. That makes you worthy of any sacrifice. Jake tried to sit up and Dr. Chang helped him. He looked at the Queen, this powerful alien ruler who had given up so much for him. Your Majesty, I don't know what to say. The price you paid was mine to choose, she finished. You gave your life without question. I gave memories. Perhaps you think your life is worth less than my memories, but I do not. Life is always worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for. You proved that. Jake felt tears stinging his eyes. He was not a man who cried easily, but the weight of what had been done for him, the realization of how many people had fought to save him, was overwhelming. Princess Ilara squeezed his hand gently. You must rest now and regain your strength. There will be time for everything else later. But Jake shook his head. I need to know. The assassins. Were they caught? All of them, Captain Foster said from the doorway. Dead or captured. They were part of a radical faction that opposed the Queen's policies. They wanted to kill Princess Ilara to send a message. Your actions disrupted their entire plan. Jake nodded slowly. That was something at least. His sacrifice had meaning. Lives had been saved. Not just the princess, but potentially many others if the assassins had been allowed to continue. Recovery was slow but steady. Dr. Chang monitored him closely, amazed at how completely the Keeper's cure had worked. Not only was the poison gone, but the damage it had caused was reversed. Jake's organs were functioning better than they had before the attack. It was as if his body had been reset to perfect health. Physical therapy helped him regain his strength. Master Torin worked with him, teaching him Velaron meditation techniques that helped his mind heal along with his body. Princess Ilara visited every day, continuing to tell him stories about her world, about the places she wanted to show him. 2 weeks after waking, Jake was finally strong enough to walk the palace grounds. Princess Ilara accompanied him, guiding him through the crystal gardens where the attack had happened. Jake found himself stopping at the spot where he had fallen, staring at the ground as if he could see the ghost of himself lying there. Do you regret it? Princess Ilara asked softly. Knowing what it cost, would you still have done it? Jake looked at her, at this young alien woman who had spent weeks at his bedside, who had refused to let him die alone in the dark. Yes, he said simply. 100 times yes. You deserve to live. Everyone deserves someone willing to stand between them and death. She smiled, her eyes glowing brighter. This is why my mother paid what she did. This is why we honor you, Jake Morrison. You understand something fundamental about the value of life. A formal ceremony was held 3 weeks after Jake woke. The great hall of the palace was filled with Velaran nobles and officials, as well as the human delegation. Jake stood before the throne, still a bit unsteady but determined to stand on his own. Queen Serana rose and descended from her throne, carrying a crystal star on a velvet cushion. The star was beautiful, shaped from pure sea,